Hello and welcome back to I've Been Playing, everyone, where today we are talking about Elden Ring. You didn't really expect anything else this week, did you? Now obviously this is another game that has a massive spoiler warning on it. I'm not going to show anything beyond what's already been shown in network tests and stuff, or at least I'm going to try to not to, but you kind of have to judge with FromSoft what counts as a spoiler for you, because I'm not generally that concerned with FromSoft, because it's one thing to see a FromSoft boss fight, and it's another thing to do a FromSoft boss fight. So you kind of have to judge for yourself. Proceed with caution. So, Elden Ring, if you are not aware, is the newest game from both From Software and, theoretically, George R.R. Martin of Game of Thrones fame. In that he wrote it, not that he was in it. Though his contribution to the overall game is still a little tenuous from my understanding. I don't know how much input he had directly, because FromSoft has been doing these kinds of epic dark fantasy things for a while now, so it's hard to tell what could be his influence and what is just From Software doing their thing. As with the other games, the story of the game is kind of piecemeal. You pick it up as you go. I would say it's more substantial than other From Software titles, and this relates also to the differences in gameplay, which we'll get into in a little bit, but there's a little more guidance and there's a little more, like I just had a chat with somebody who actually kind of told me what I was supposed to do, at least where I was supposed to go, which generally, doesn't really happen. There's a little bit of that, but not nearly as, go over here, this is where this boss is, kind of a thing. The main gist of the game is that you are trying to collect Great Runes because you want to become the Elden Lord. I think that's what all the advertising says the end game is, so I think that's where you're headed. But between From Software's ambiguous storytelling and the fact that this one is open world now, you can kind of do whatever you want. So to start out with, there are a load of different character classes, as there always are. It's very important to experiment with them. This game, for many reasons that again I will get into in a second, is more welcoming to newcomers than the others probably are, just because there are a lot more tutorials and stuff. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is at least a little more open with how its mechanics work, because there are actual tutorial screens. The only other one that happens in is Sekiro, and Sekiro's hard. Like, really hard. But, as I was saying, there are a ton of character classes. It's good to experiment with them. If one doesn't mesh with you as much as you thought, try another one. I started as a samurai. It's a dex build mainly. It has a little magic, which I've never used in a From Software game before, but is much, much easier to get into, understand, and use in this one. Now you still have to build up those magic skills, so either intelligence, faith, or arcane, depending on the spell or weapon, but I'm finding it a lot easier than in other games to understand and just get equipped to deal with. And it's also a big help, especially the ranged magic. I think most of it is ranged magic, but it's been a big help, especially in boss fights. Now, a lot of the essentials are still there. You have runes instead of souls. You have the basic interface that's the same. It feels very familiar to anyone who has played a Souls game before, even a Souls-like game before. It feels very similar. It feels very good. It's very polished, as they always are. Like, they know what they're doing when they're crafting a game. It feels doable, and when it's definitely not doable at your level, you can tell, because you will get wiped out. And that's true even of the... Or do they count as mini-bosses? I guess? I don't know. The bosses around the world that aren't story bosses. Are they mini-bosses? Are they just bosses, but they're not big bosses? Like, what do I call them? I don't know. But they're all around the world, and the starting area is Limgrave. It's very large, but it is nowhere near the size of the full map, because I have gone not a lot of places, but enough places that this map is much more massive than I expected it to be, even though they said it was their biggest open world. Well, biggest world, I guess. It's big, but there are a lot of areas around Limgrave, and the bosses there have kind of the same feel. Some of them you'll feel like you can do, some of them will feel like they're a bit too hard. There's one that's still a bit too hard for me, and I've gotten, without getting into spoiling bosses or anything, I mean, you might see on the footage, but I've gotten the first Great Rune, and there's still one boss in the opening area that's a bit too tough for me. Just one, shows up at night. Haven't defeated it yet. You might know which one I mean if you've been playing the game yourself. The thing with the combat this time is that it feels like I'm at least trying out weapons a lot more, like different weapons, because of the Ashes of War mechanic. It gives you basically magic abilities attached to your weapons, and you can switch them out, but some of them only go on certain weapons, and some of them are more effective on certain weapons, and they affect your stats and how your weapons level with your stats, which is a complicated thing to figure out, but basically your weapons are attached to certain stats that make them level up better, which I think, in theory, means that they get more damage the more you level up that skill, depending on whether it's rated, I think, from A to E, and they're generally somewhere C, D, or E. They're not generally great, it's not generally like a huge benefit, but they are attached to certain skills. So some of the Ashes of War go on certain weapons. They improve how you level with those stats. They give you something else to do, like you just start with a parry, generally, and I was getting along with the parry okay, but I don't find myself using it as much lately, although I'm also not using my shield as much because I picked up a staff and I've been messing with the magic, and I don't have very high magic stats yet, but I'm improving them a lot more than I have in any other FromSoft game. I'm tailoring for that a little bit more than usual. So my recommendation would definitely be to at least experiment with magic. Maybe don't start with a magic build, especially if it's your first From Software title, but look into it. And besides the Ashes of War, you also have the summons that are based on ashes, so you can collect those around the world. Sometimes you get them, I think, from defeating enemies or bosses. You also get Ashes of War that way. You can also buy them. You can upgrade all this stuff, obviously. And they're just little extra things, so you're not just relying on beating things with swords, which is effective, granted, but you can expand your repertoire a little bit and kind of personalize it. It feels like to a degree that they haven't really done before, like it's more than ever before. There are also waypoints and guidelines, so it does kind of tell you where you're supposed to go and where I guess the easiest path to go first would be. Easiest, such as it is. I definitely recommend following that at least for a little bit. I did kind of explore the open world a bit, and obviously you want to do that and level up and kind of figure out how the combat works and stuff. You don't want to immediately go for the giant boss, that's a bad idea. But it definitely is helpful to see that that is the suggested way to go first in terms of progressing the story, because I wandered somewhere that I should not have wandered, got just absolutely killed by an invading NPC. It was a mess. Like, I immediately crossed over. I couldn't go back because I was immediately in a boss fight. There's also somewhere else I got warped to that I'm not going to spoil, but I got warped there and there was this massive thing and I was like, I'm probably not good enough to fight this, but let's try because I don't have that many runes and I'm right here. There's a Lost Grace, Place of Grace, Site of Grace, whatever the equivalent of Bonfire. It's Grace. It's right there. Let's try it. And I whacked it a couple times, did basically nothing. It was like 15 damage, maybe. And then it one hit killed me. And I was like, okay, I'm not supposed to be here yet. I don't know why I got warped here. I don't know how I got warped here. I don't know which NPC I talked to. I don't remember at this point. No, I remember. I remember now. But I got warped somewhere I shouldn't have been. And I talked to somebody. And that was fine, and that area was fine. But as soon as I went out of that little safe haven area with the NPC that I could talk to, it was a bad time. It was a bad time. So definitely follow the waypoints and the guidelines. If you don't want to, just wander into a desert and get killed immediately. That's my advice. Now, I know that I'm not getting into super specifics, but this is still a FromSoft game. You know, it's the newest one. It's still From Software. There are some differences. There's a lot more emphasis on co-op, although the one time I tried to actually summon someone for a co-op thing, it didn't even bother trying. Like, it didn't bother trying to connect, so I don't know if that's fixed yet, or just getting better as time goes on. You know, there are those changed mechanics, but it is still a From Software game. I don't know what else I can say. You're gonna go into this knowing what to expect, or maybe not. I mean, hopefully this brings some new people into the franchise. It's a little more accessible. I'm not going to say it's greatly accessible. It's still difficult, but there are a lot of little things that they do to at least explain what the heck is going on and what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to do it. And there's, like I said, there's a little more guidance with tutorial screens, but generally it's a From Software game. There are difficult bosses. It's just open world now, so be careful I also don't want to talk about it too much because part of the fun of From Software games in general, and this one specifically because it's open world, is I don't want to, like, spoil anything. I know I said at the beginning you have to decide what spoilers are for yourself in this kind of title, but honestly, half the fun is discovering things for yourself, so I don't want to get into it too much. Other things I will mention are, obviously you have the horse now, so you can do some horse combat. It feels a little awkward sometimes. There's a lot of circling around enemies and trying to hit them and not hitting them, or them not hitting you, so it feels a little funky. It's kind of fun, but it doesn't feel very effective sometimes, although there are other times where it's probably the most effective way to do, for example, a boss fight. It just doesn't feel very polished. There are also a few graphical things. I'm playing again on PS5, and there are a lot of, like, I don't know if it's a draw distance issue or what, but there's a lot of just stuff popping in the distance, and this is a fairly frequent occurrence, which feels like it shouldn't be a thing. There's also some stuff I've heard reports of frame rate issues. I haven't had any, like, up close and personal frame rate issues, but in the distance, things' wings look really bad. Like, the frame rate is nowhere near the actual game frame rate. I don't know what's going on, but they look like they're flapping, you know what I mean, like flapping extremely slowly or whatever. Their frame rate is just not up to par for some reason from a distance. Up close they're fine, but from a distance they look really bizarre. There's also this one weird glitch where I tried to get on my horse kept going, disappeared, I was hovering in midair, and like 20 seconds later I just died spontaneously, and this has happened multiple times, I think at least twice, and it's really annoying, obviously. Thankfully, both times I was able to collect my runes fairly easily because it wasn't in a difficult place to get back to. But I was like, I don't know what happened. And the first time I thought I got stuck on something, and that may have been the case, but the second one I was in an open field, so I don't know what happened there. Now these are things that may be fixed with a patch, possibly the patch that went live yesterday, I don't know. Also, I mentioned there are a whole bunch of other new mechanics, and I mentioned some of them. I think I mentioned most of them. Honestly, I think the Ashes of War are kind of the biggest one. Certainly the biggest one I'm using the most often, although saying that, I don't actually think I'm using it all that often. I just forget it's there. But there's also a crafting system now, which seems, at least for my build, irrelevant. I think I've built or crafted maybe 2 things just to see how it works, and mostly I haven't. I don't know what I need, I don't know what this stuff does. I haven't really meshed with it or played around with it very much. It could be it's very useful, I have no idea. It could be it's very useful for specific types of builds, who knows? But I'm just not using it, so I don't really see the point of it. Like, it just kind of feels like an addition they felt they had to do because it's an open world game and that's what open world games do. It just doesn't fit for me. It doesn't feel like it fits. But overall, obviously, I am enjoying myself. This is a From Software game. It's not for everybody, even though it's more accepting of newcomers and more easy, I would say, to wrap your head around in many ways. It's not for everyone. They're hard. You're gonna find it hard. You're gonna find it hard even if you're used to FromSoft, and don't tell me you won't, because you will. I don't care how much From Software you've played. They're hard when you start them. But I'm enjoying it. It is a very good game. It is a very good From Software game. But overall, I am enjoying the game. It is fun, though difficult, and it's another From Software title, so, you know, this is like the first game I've actually pre-ordered in a long time because it's From Software and I trust them, and it is very polished. It has its issues, don't they all at launch at this point, but it's From Software. You can expect quality, and if this is the type of game you enjoy and you have enjoyed other From Software titles, you enjoy Souls-like just generally, it's another good addition to your catalog. There you go, those are my thoughts on Elden Ring. As I said, I know that wasn't super specific in any certain way, but this has been covered to death already, and I don't want to spoil too much because, as I said, part of the fun of this game is exploring for yourself. So let me know what you think of it down in the comments below, if you've been playing it, if you want to play it, if you're waiting a little bit for whatever reason, if you're getting along with it, if you're not, what class you are, that kind of thing. Anything you want to tell me about the game, put it down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, leave a like, consider subscribing if you're not, because I do one of these every Monday, and I will see you next time!